The best laid schemes of mice and men go often askew, and leave us nothing but grief and pain for promised joy. Many of us might be familiar with Robert Burns's poem. We may not know the whole poem, or that it is called To a Mouse, but chances are pretty good that we know the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. The lines speak to us of how we can carefully plan, and the unexpected can still happen. For example, we can make a list to remind us of all that we need to pack for our vacation. We can check the list once, twice, 3 times. We head off confident that we have everything we need for our trip. We arrive later at our destination, only to discover that we forgot something important: a toothbrush, socks, or what have you. Or we can carefully plan our lives. We can make goals and dream dreams. We can say, in 5 years, here's where I want to be, personally or professionally. In XYZ years, I want to be able to retire comfortably. Again, when the time comes, we may find that things do not always work out as we expected. The Apostle Paul can certainly relate. Several times, Paul tries to get deeper into Asia. Each time, the path is blocked. Then Paul has a dream. An unknown man appears to Paul. The man pleads with Paul to come to Macedonia and share the good news. After consulting with Luke, Timothy, and Silas, the 4 head to Macedonia. This eventually brings them to Philippi. Philippi is a Roman colony. The lack of a synagogue indicates that there is not a noticeable Jewish community. Paul and his helpers do find a small prayer gathering near the river outside of Philippi. There, Paul meets several women and shares God's love in Jesus with them. Among those women is Lydia. Lydia, Luke notes, is not a native of Philippi. She is from Thyatira, a city in Asia Minor, or what we call Turkey today. That is where the purple cloth comes from. Lydia apparently is the first international businesswoman. Her presence in Philippi connects Europe to Asia Minor. Notice that Lydia is already inclined to hearing Paul's message. Luke calls her a worshiper of God. In other words, Lydia is a seeker, to use a modern term. Her heart and her mind are already open and receptive to God, fertile ground for receiving the wonderful news of Jesus. Lydia and her household are baptized and become Jesus followers in response to Paul's words. Lydia then uses her gift of hospitality and welcomes Paul into her home. Paul stays with Lydia for several days, teaching and preaching. A community of other Jesus followers soon starts meeting in Lydia's house. I do not think it is a stretch to say that Lydia's influence is partly responsible for spreading Christianity. Lydia plays a vital role in bringing the Christian faith from Asia into Europe. Philippi is generally considered the first Christian community in Europe. Paul later writes them a letter from prison, a letter believed to be his last. None of this would have been possible if Paul had been able to follow his plan. We do not know why doors are closed to Paul in Mysia or Bithynia. Some scholars suggest an illness. Other scholars think that cities refuse entry to Paul after his visits caused conflict in other communities. See Acts chapter 14, verses 19 through 20 for one such example. Ultimately, however, the why is not important. What is important is that Paul's plans are interrupted. Things do not go as Paul planned. Paul, however, is able to let the Holy Spirit guide him, and a much more fruitful ministry takes place. The good news of God's love in Jesus is brought to northern Greece. Personally, I find it easy to get frustrated or discouraged when my plans do not go as I want. Here, I, for one, can learn from today's reading. I must hold my plans and dreams lightly. Sometimes God has a different, better plan in store. If I insist on my way and block the Spirit's movement, I risk missing out on what God has in store. Maybe you can relate. Perhaps you share that struggle as well. This week, I encourage you and I encourage myself to make time to ponder the movement in the Spirit and to see where the Holy Spirit might be leading and guiding you this week, even if it means your plans are interrupted. It's also important to remember that if our plans do not go exactly the way they wanted, we don't have to get upset or discouraged. All it means is maybe the timing isn't right. Perhaps God has something different and much, much better in store.